Ah, should look a little nicer for this one.
Hey guys, it's Edward. Today, I'll be talking about communicating in software engineering, particularly when it comes to big projects and big companies. I'll be giving you my top 3 tips when it comes to communicating with your fellow professionals in a large company as an engineer. As a senior developer who used to work at Apple, or should I say ex-Apple senior developer, or am I allowed to do that? There is a responsibility to drive products and projects from inception to development. Even if they don't have the same knowledge as you, don't speak the same design languages as you, and have other priorities, you are still expected to get the job done. Being able to properly communicate your needs and wants as an engineer with people will go a long way in building the relationships you need to drive your effort. If you can succeed at this, you will get promoted, you will be trusted, you will be the guy on the team everyone looks up to. With all that, you can begin to build your vision for the products you want to make and influence the direction of future company products. And it all starts with being able to communicate and get the right support. So with that, let's begin. My first tip is to communicate as simply and efficiently as possible. Now, what do I mean by this? If you watch any of my past coding interview sessions I do with my students, by the way, you can watch those for free on my channel, a lot of people ask me if there should be more talking or less talking. Should I talk more about my thoughts? Should I talk less if the interviewer is phasing out? And how do I know if I'm talking too much? And the same questions apply not just in interviews, but also in projects. How do you know if you sent too many messages? How do you convey your urgency? Did you convey your urgency? Who should you talk to, and how should you deliver your intentions? The gold standard is to convey what you need in the fewest words possible, such that it can still be understood. You should only need to convey what is absolutely necessary and within reason. Most of the time, people don't need to know as much as you think they do. In fact, they might not even know as much as you think they do. Even though it might have taken you days of code deep diving and communicating across different teams to figure out what you need, the person you need that from might not need to know all the little details. It might be important to you, but it's probably not important to them. In either case, what is important is that you can convey what you need to get the job done. For instance, if I want to talk to a server engineer about opening a new API endpoint to support uploading images, I would say something like, I need a new API that allows me to upload images to a user's account. What is the work needed to get this done? This is pretty urgent. Notice that I didn't need to give any background information. I didn't need to tell him about why this feature is needed or who assigned it to me. I don't need to tell him the specific timeline unless he asks, because he might be unavailable right now. But at least I do want to convey to him the sense of urgency of the task. We can always dive into the details, reprioritize, and so on, but the core intention of the message has been conveyed. Now compare this to what some other people might say. Hey Devin, it's Edward. We are in the middle of our sprint and one of our engineers has just left the team and I need to pick up his project. We are trying to create a feature that allows users to upload documents and photos to the server, and we need you to create a configuration URL that allows us to do post requests with images. Please let me know. We need this done by the end of our sprint in 6 weeks and blah, 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 blah. Notice here that I've been extremely verbose unnecessarily and included a lot of extraneous information. The fact that a teammate has left. The fact that we're trying to generate a new feature when really I might not even need to do this at all. And my request is just plain wordy. Some of you might think that you are communicating effectively by simply talking more or using more words. But in reality, it's actually doing the opposite. It's extremely taxing for people to continually have to parse your words to figure out their meaning. Eventually, they will get to a point where they'll ignore your messages simply because they don't want to deal with you. People are inherently lazy, so make it easy for them to support you by making their lives easier. Give them less work to do. As a benchmark, you should be able to convey any message in such a way that your grandmother can understand what you're talking about. Of course, you can add or remove details to fit the context, but the core language should be very simple and easy to understand. This leads me to my second tip. Make sure you tailor your language to the person you're talking to. As engineers, we're pretty garbage at talking to people. I mean, yeah, we know a lot of languages, programming languages, but that's only really used to talk to machines and not human beings. If you have ever watched the show Silicon Valley, the main character, Richard, talks in a way where he does not consider that his audience are just normal people, non-engineers. He continually dives into nitty-gritty details that excite him, but bore the VCs. As a result, he continually gets dismissed because of it. Spoiler alert, this actually bites him in the ass in season 3. When you're talking to people, the context really does matter. People don't understand your tech stack. They don't understand a lot of your section of code or what your system does or how it works. Not to mention, they have their own agenda and concerns. So you need to bring the language down to a level that they can understand. If you are talking to a product manager, that person cares about how the user interacts and responds to the product. So you should be able to describe what you do and what you need in those terms. You might want to describe your application in visual interactions. What does the user interactions look like? What happens when the user exits out of the application at a particular screen? If you're talking to a systems engineer, you might be able to go into more detail. That person cares about how all the moving pieces of code and components interact. So you should be able to describe how your application interacts with and affects the entire system. What happens when too many app instances make requests? Do we support idempotency, or is this a NoSQL database? Specific questions like these are something that systems engineers can and should be able to help you with. So you really don't need to change your language when dealing with them. In general, the further away your audience is from the technical understanding and implementation in terms of knowledge and ability to understand, the simpler your explanations should be. Being able to convey knowledge in ways that relate to what a person cares about is not only a great way to get them to understand, it's also a great way to get them to support you, because this will force you to naturally describe your product in a way that aligns with what they want to do. Their goals are aligned with your goals, and this helps in building good working relationships with people who aren't on your team. You might not even have the same shared knowledge, but in the end, if you can do this the right way, you'll both be working for the same result. And finally, my third tip is really to take responsibility and the credit. Believe it or not, a large majority of communication is actually nonverbal. It's not just the body language that you express, it's also your actions, because it's not about what you say or how you say it, it's about what you do. For instance, I've had to demo projects to senior management and VPs, and I can tell you, it's not a very easy thing to do. A lot of you might think of it as glamorous because you're finally getting noticed by the corporate leadership. But the risk is that you are staking your team's reputation on what is being presented. If the demo goes poorly, your team's image suffers, and as the face of the demo, you take the biggest hit. On the other hand, if the demo goes well, then people just silently nod, see that your team is chugging along just fine, and just move along. So really, demos are more about just convincing others that your team is okay. To be in a situation like that requires demonstrating that you can take responsibility. And I don't mean just saying that you'll take responsibility for whatever happens. As an example, suppose your code breaks because of the project's changing requirements or someone else misuses your API. You can blame the refactor, or you can blame the client who didn't read through the code comments before using it. And I mean, in both those situations, you would be in the right. The person using your code should have really read the documentation, and people should have considered what had previously been built. But if you do either of these, you're also telling other people that you are the kind of person who blames others when things go wrong. I mean, you're right on a factual level, but your team still has a mess to deal with. You could have easily avoided the issue altogether by accounting for every possible use case and bulletproofing your code. You could have written better tests, added exceptions that make it hard to misuse your code, maybe even accounting for any abuse of the code. Random failures happen all the time, and the more responsibility you take for things, the more ready you are to protect yourself from them, and in turn, the more you will be trusted, because you will have the ability to handle everything. Consider Steve Jobs' initial iPhone demo in 2007. The initial iPhone was still under construction and underdeveloped, and constantly crashing. So, on that stage, he didn't use the same iPhone. He actually used 4. He swapped phones to compensate, and nobody in the world noticed. He could have easily blamed the engineers, but all eyes were on him, so he had the responsibility to perform and cover those mistakes. And this kind of showmanship is also a form of nonverbal communication. You are demonstrating your ability to create and present something of value, which also means taking the glory when good things come. It's important that your efforts get recognized, and it's much easier to convince others that you deserve the credit if you are willing to take ownership of the risk. Because showing responsibility is not enough. If your efforts do not pay off, how do you communicate to people that you're being effective? Take that brief moment in the spotlight and get back to the grindstone. Communicate that you are someone who can get shit done and doesn't just simply show up. If you're the one risking your neck time and time again, you are communicating your faith and belief, and people tend to trust and follow that. On the other hand, if you show up for the glory but never for the risk, no one will ever trust you because you have just communicated to others that you are an opportunist. In short, presentation, professionalism, and nonverbal communication cannot be understated, as that is the most impactful way of communicating your value on a project and as an engineer. So that'll do for me. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.